The biggest news this week is that we've got a new manager. It was, are we saying Evan Juric, the new manager? Has been appointed on an 18-month deal. Alfie, you got to hear from him today. What were your first impressions?
Yeah, I think close, but no cigar. Ivan Juric, I
Evan
believe
Juric.
the pronunciation. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what to expect from him because obviously we've seen, press conferences in the past where he's sort of been writing down journalists' names, and we've seen him having an argument with the sporting director of Roma at one point, a physical argument during pre-season. So you're always a bit cautious, but actually, we met him for sort of 5 minutes beforehand, and then spoke to him in the press conference as well. And he's clearly, concise, calculated, professional. But I didn't think he was, I didn't think he was cold or anything to be afraid of, or anybody to not enjoy talking to. He seemed like a nice chap, and I thought what was really interesting is that he says he's been watching a lot of Southampton for 2 years really, because he was linked with a job back in when Ralph Hasenhüttl was sacked, and was one of the targets for the job. I think he was at Torino at the time, and since then he's always had, I suppose, a bit of an interest in the club, and now that he has the opportunity to come in, he's excited about it, and I think it's an interesting move. So yeah, as a bloke, I mean, I think he's going to be, let's be clear, defensive first. You look at his Torino teams, they scored, I think, 36 goals last season or something like that. It's the third fewest in the league. They also conceded the third fewest in the league. They had, I think, 7 or 8 0-0 draws, maybe even 9 0-0 draws. And I think 18 of the 26 or however many games he's won have been to nil. So his philosophy clearly is about building from the back, and then everything else comes after that. But that might be just what this team needs at the moment. It's certainly what the board felt they needed. And he has got a clearly defined style, so they've stuck to it with that. But it's definitely a departure from what we've been used to with Russell Martin. That's, isn't it? I mean, they've really sort of moved on from that now. It feels like it's more back towards the original metrics that they wanted when they appointed Nathan Jones, which is aggression, tenacity, set pieces. So let's see how it goes. But yeah, interesting appointment, and he seems like a nice guy.
It wasn't a name that we were overly familiar with, Steve. We had all the usual runners and riders. I mean, what did you know about him? What do we know about him so far? I think he was most recently manager for Roma, but of course got sacked after, I think, 12 matches in charge. But that kind of only tells half the story there, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the Roma situation, I mean, they're owned by the same guys who've just taken over at Everton. So, yeah, good luck, lads. They're been a little bit of a basket case over the last decade, really. They've been not particularly successful, apart from that brief period where they had Jose Mourinho in charge, where actually, weirdly, despite his football not necessarily being to everybody's taste, they were actually quite a fun club to kind of keep an eye on in terms of sort of everything that was going on sort of off the pitch, really. But yeah, in terms of what we know about Juric, not a huge amount, other than what his Wikipedia page tells us. Quite frankly, I mean, I don't really watch Serie A games anymore. Used to watch it a little bit when it was on a little bit more regularly on BT, and obviously previously Channel 4. But yeah, I must admit I didn't know a huge amount about him. But looking at his record, I mean, obviously the Roma job is his most recent, so ultimately you are only as good as your last job. But his previous roles there, 2 and 3 years against less fancy teams, and kept them in sort of fairly sort of mid-table obscurity. So I mean, that's a position we'd absolutely die for right now, isn't it? Let's be honest. So yeah, I mean, if we can keep the solidity that we showed for the most part yesterday, and try and add a little bit going forward, then yeah, who knows? Maybe this season isn't a complete lost cause. I think let's be honest, we're probably still too far gone. But if you can at least make it competitive and give the sides above us something to think about, then yeah, you never know.
Glen, he's had little success elsewhere, but the results that we've had can't really get any worse than they already are at the moment. So in a way, it's kind of like a free hit, isn't it? He's got the chance to be a hero if he pulls it off. If he doesn't, then no one's going to blame him.
If he keeps us up, he's an absolute miracle worker. Let's be honest, and we'll probably lose him in the summer because there's always teams looking for miracle workers. Manchester United might want him. You never know.
Or City.
Yeah. So I mean, if he can get a tune out of this squad in terms of getting the 30 or so points that we need, out of the last 20 games. You know, that's it, and at 1.5 points a game. it's no, that's not right. A yarn, you know what I mean? But it's going to be very, very difficult. Obviously, he knows that. You know, I like the comments he made today, but it's easy to make a good first impression with your words when the fans of the club in question that you've just joined are at a bit of a low ebb. You're not expecting anything, so someone comes in and says the right things. It's you know, it picks everybody up. But at the end of the day, it's the actions speak louder than words thing, isn't it? And you know, it's all very well saying you're going to play this type of football or you'd like to. The question is, have we got the players to do that? Now, you know, just for argument's sake, if you look at our midfield players, if he's saying he wants them to be running for 90 minutes, then Adam Lallana might as well retire. And
take Will Smallbone with him.
Will Smallbone can go with him or start looking for another club, because there are some players that we've got that are just not going to be suitable for the high pressing football, and that's the trouble that you have when you almost change philosophies, if you like. I mean, take Lallana, for example. I bet he thought he was going to sort of like turn up here playing a nice passing team. He wouldn't have to run much, and he could just knock the ball around. But that's obviously not going to be the case now, and there's going to be a lot more energy. And I think our stats will probably prove that out. But no, I mean, he, you know, at least I think and I think you saw yesterday, he's going to get them battling. He's going to get them. You know, there hopefully won't be the capitulations that we've seen, certainly recently. So yeah, you can go a long way with that, and you can go a long way with the base that we provided up at Fulham, where we were just solid and a lot more sort of horrible and unpleasant to play against than we have been recently. So yeah, good luck to him. I don't know what to make of the fight in the car park thing that he had at Roma. I don't know. I don't know what that says about him. Hopefully, it says that he's someone who doesn't take any crap, and he's going to get stuck in. So as long as he doesn't thump Rasmus Ankerson before the West Ham game, I'm quite looking forward to seeing what effect he.
There's been times when we've all wanted to do it.
He'd get a round of applause from some people, but no, I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings, because you know, though we tried to play nice football under Russell Martin, it ultimately was spectacularly unsuccessful in this division. So I think he can only improve things. I hope that's not famous last words.
Do we know any more about the deal, Alfie? There was talk about a summer break clause, which seemed to be like a get out clause for both of us. It didn't really make much sense to me. But was there anything in that? Do we know any more about that?
Yeah, I mean, as I understand it, I'm not sure sort of how much we can really say and confirm, but I don't think that exists. Basically, right. I think it's an 18-month contract, and you know, that's the plan. And I asked Ivan today in the embargo section, which is yet to come out. Is this a long-term project for you? And I'm happy to say, you know, although it's pre-embargo, he only answered with one or two words, and one of them was yes. So he sees it as a long-term project. It obviously remains to be seen if that's still the case. There's going to be a lot of things in between now and then that will dictate that. But I think, you know, given to see someone who's admired the club for a couple of years and wants to get stuck in, and I don't think that the ownership wants to change again. I think it probably makes sense for there to be no break clause, even though it would protect the club in some way, because the last thing you want to do is get to the summer and you feel you have to change, and then it costs you a few quid again. So yeah, I wouldn't expect the club to be changing again this summer. I think he should be here for next year, but like I say, there's a lot between now and then for that to happen.
And I haven't seen the stuff today from the press conference. Was there any word about like the backroom staff and who might be coming in, who might be going, or is that all sort of still to be confirmed?
That will come out in the embargo section at 10:30 today. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, that'll be out tomorrow.
Right. Okay. Steve, it'd be interesting to see what they do in the January transfer window. Now, do we kind of like stick or twist? Last time we seemed to waste about 50 million quid. We're going to have our hands tied a little bit, I guess, going into this. Yeah, we're going to have the hands tied a little bit going into the window. But that would be interesting just to see how much they back him and who we need to get in to play his style, as Glen was alluding to.
Yeah, I think ultimately you're going to see runners. Players who are sort of excuse me, willing and capable of sort of running for prolonged periods of the game to kind of stretch the game, and essentially you're kind of banking on being the fittest team in the league. I don't know how plausible that is in such a short space of time, especially when we've got a game every 3 days for the next 2 or 3 weeks. But that's likely to be the plan eventually. So yeah, you're going to be looking to hopefully sign a couple of players to give everybody a bit of a boost. But of course, we know that the squad's full, so 1 or 2 are going to have to go in order to make space. And I mean, other than the players that we'd like to keep, it's difficult to kind of envisage anybody moving on. Really, it's, you look at the players that are on the fringes or not even on the fringe anymore, and who's going to take them on the likely Premier League salary that they're on, because they sure as hell they're not going to get into a Premier League side other than ours. I mean, they're not getting into ours. So yeah, how do you kind of square that circle and make some room for a couple of sort of fresh arrivals, just to give everything a little bit of a sort of fresh impetus, really. I don't know. I mean, do you kind of sacrifice one big hitter, take the money that might be on offer for someone, and then reinvest it in a couple of players? I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether you can, given, as I say, the squad probably still needs more outgoings than incomings. So yeah, I mean, difficult. You kind of don't really know what's up their sleeve in terms of whether they've got anybody specific in mind. Because you would imagine that what they had in mind 2 weeks ago is probably different to what they've got in mind now, because the system's going to be very different. So the requirements have suddenly changed. So yeah, I mean, as ever, wait and see. But yeah, I would imagine there'll be some more pace, some more strength. I think you're looking for probably athletes rather than anything particularly technical. Although maybe sort of a better finisher up front might be an option if there's a loan, because I mean, quite frankly, I don't think we're going to be able to afford someone who's going to be better than what we've got in terms of buying. So I mean, I think I mentioned this one last week. If Evan Ferguson's available from Brighton and we're able to get him, then yeah, by all means, do that deal if we can kind of work things. Although obviously, Big Les coming back into play yesterday and putting in a credible performance.
Well, I think we've all said on the podcast, haven't we, Steve? To be fair, really, like, I think all 3 of us probably in agreement, maybe that, you know, Maxwell Cornet, we're happy to see leave, but there is maybe a use for Leslie you could chuck with. There is a player in there somehow if you use right. So
yeah, I think certainly the position that he plays, we've lacked strength all season. I mean, we've all said Flynn Downs hasn't quite made the step up that I think we expected him to. I mean, Shay Charles is obviously out on loan at Sheffield Wednesday, but I kind of think he's probably best left there for the season, just to kind of get a full season of playing 90 minutes and playing regularly in a team at that level, because realistically he'll be straight back into the fold with us next season if we do go down. So yeah, I mean, it's not cut and dried, as you say. I think Cornet will probably go back if we can arrange that somehow, and then maybe that opens a door somewhere. But yeah, we'll see.
The trouble is, Glenn, we've seen it all before, haven't we? The new managers coming in and we get all excited, and then like half time, first game, it's like, oh, here we go.
Yeah, but as I said, you can't really get much worse than what it's been. I mean, you know, look at the last 2 home games. Tottenham, well, just Tottenham. Just look at that game and how pathetic that was. That was the way things were going. You know, we'd reached the point where we were getting smashed and we were absolutely unbelievably bad. So there was there was no way that that situation could be allowed to continue. So, we just got to hope that a fresh voice and a fresh approach and a new manager to impress, gets into these players. And I mean, you mentioned Leslie Ugochukwu there. He obviously had his issues with Russell Martin, and he was chucked out the squad, and there was all that Instagram rubbish and all that. So he obviously had his issues, and he's obviously come back in. Whether it was Simon Rusk who brought him in, or whether it was anything to do with Ivan Juric, he had a tremendous game yesterday. And when he came on as a sub, and I was worried about the centre of midfield because that Joe Aribo is not the most athletic, and he's not very good at picking up runners. And if Leslie can replicate that form that he showed in the last half an hour, that is exactly what I wanted him to be when we brought him in on loan. This athletic player who got about the park, smashed into tackles, had a bit of skill about him as well. I know one swallow don't make a summer, but he showed enough there that it looked like he wanted to be involved. He wanted to do better. He had someone new to impress. He felt like he had a chance, and he came on and did really well. So the big issue for me is the Fulham game was very good defensively compared to what we have been, obviously, but the attacking wise it was woeful again, and that's the area that does worry me. And I just feel like we have to do something different in the attacking areas. So if you're looking at players to bring in, it has to be, I guess, quick, powerful attacking players, and not more of the same, because we've got enough of those sort of players, and they haven't done it. And we're going to have to go down a different route there.
I think
who we
looking
get,
at
how we afford it, don't know.
Well, looking at Ivan's sort of previous teams, Roma and Torino, they usually play with like a three-pronged attack, don't they? Whether it's a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-2-1. So, you still look at that and you think, well, that front three is that Cameron Archer, Paul Onuachu, Tyler Diblin, and then you mentioned that midfield two is that Leslie Ugochukwu and Flynn Down. So that leaves out Matty Fernandez, or do you play a front three of Matty Fernandez, Diblin, Onuachu, or so he's got things to work out. But I mean, in terms of trying to create chances in attack, I think that George did some research and found that the right centre-back of the three, and I actually think we saw this a little bit in the game against Fulham with Taylor Harwood-Bellis, they tend to rotate sort of out to the right, and that right wing-back pushes right up. And I think sometimes it was Stefan El-Shouari for Roma, who's a left winger by trade. So I'm wondering, Yuki Sugawara, he's probably going to be key potentially, or Kyle. And Taylor, I mean, that Mancini, so Gianluca Mancini, who I'm talking about, the right centre-back for Roma, he's created 10 chances this season, which is by far and away the most of any defender, from centre-back. So I'm interested to see what Ivan does. Clearly, he's going to come in and focus on defence first, but he needs to start scoring goals, because 0-0 draw is not going to win, not going to keep you up this season. So I'm intrigued to see sort of where those chances come from, how they recreate those, sort of the lack of finishes in the aggregate. And I think it could be that right-hand side of defence.
Just a word on Simon Rusk as well, Alfie, before we move on, because that's someone that kind of found themselves thrust into the job. Seemed like short notice to us. He wasn't quite sure how long he'd be around for, but I don't think he did himself any harm, did he? He came across really well, and again, you could argue that it couldn't have got any worse, but it was a job and a role that he didn't really want to be doing, and he did it pretty well, I thought.
Yeah, I think it was a club's dream in terms of the press and the media, because he did 2 or 3 press conferences and reasonable length, and he answered every single question without saying a single thing effectively for an entire week, which is just what you want in an interim period. And then he set the team up twice, 5-4-1, and he was very clear about it. We've conceded way too many goals. We've been way too easy to beat, and I think I think quite clearly the players were sick of it, to be honest with you. I think they were sick of how open they were. It was banked up 5-4-1, 2 games. The first half was obviously bad. They were 3-0 down, but then 3 halves in a row without conceding a goal. So that's what you need from an interim period. Just get through those games. And at the end of the day, they put a point on the board, which is something they've not done many times this season. So, to go away from home to Fulham, first team to keep a clean sheet at Craven Cottage, get a point on the board. Yeah, a lot of credit for Simon Rusk, and I think that the 21s are in good hands with him. So I'm pretty sure he'll return to that 21s head coach role now, which is what he's all about, player development. But yeah, steady hands and did a job.